The Prime Minister and his wife have been very public figures, and many people have, hold them in high esteem and a real affection for them. And I think this is a sad event. But again, they've asked for privacy, and I think I'll do my very best to respect that.
Justin Trudeau and Sophie Grégoire Trudeau have announced their separation after 18 years of marriage. They both released statements on Instagram this afternoon about the decision to separate. The Prime Minister's office says they have worked to ensure all legal and ethical steps have been taken. Let us bring in the power panel. Jonathan Kalis is a former Quebec advisor to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and senior consultant at Macmillan Vantage. Rob Benzie is the Toronto Star's Queen's Park bureau chief, and here with me in studio, Jordan Likeness, the Canada program manager for the Friedrich Ebert Foundation, and Tim Powers is the chair of Summa Strategies. Rob, I'll start with you. We often don't talk about politicians' personal lives in this country. It's just sort of a thing that has unfolded over many decades. And yet here we are. What do you make of how this has unfolded today?
Well, I mean, David, it is probably the biggest Canadian news story of the year internationally. I couldn't believe the New York Times and Politico doing news alerts. It's on the front of the Daily Telegraph and the Daily Mail and the Guardian in the UK. It's a huge story in the non-English speaking world because Mr. Trudeau is a global celebrity. I mean, he's one of the best known world leaders. Now, here at home, he's just our prime minister, but abroad, he's sort of a, film star / kind of, woke warrior type of guy who a lot of people point to as a role model. And I think that's the interesting thing for me, just watching the coverage. Obviously, I feel for their kids, for Justin and Sophie's 3 children. It's the hardest thing for them to watch their parents split up. Mr. Trudeau himself wrote movingly in his book about watching his parents split up, and of course, his father, Pierre-Elliott Trudeau, is the only other prime minister to part ways with a spouse while in office. So I think that for Canadians, it's an interesting news event, but for a family, it's a personal and painful thing. So I think that's something. But I mean, I was just looking at our stats on this today, David. That 4 of the top 5 stories at Star.com are on this event, and I think it shows there's an insatiable interest in it.
Yeah, we're absolutely saying the same thing on CBCNews.ca. I mean, there is a personal component to this, but there absolutely is a political component. He is the Prime Minister, so anything that happens. And Jordan, when you look at Grégoire Trudeau having such a role politically, speaking at conventions, she has her own causes. What does this do in that political dynamic for the Prime Minister?
Sure, yeah, and I think you're right to point out that, she's been a political figure in her own right, and certainly a presence at his side through all of those key moments in his career. I would say that my suspicion is that what this will do for the Prime Minister is actually humanize him. This is a pretty relatable thing to have happen. Marriages break down all the time, and I think for a lot of Canadians who maybe have tuned out from politics, especially during the summer, this is something that will punch through and I think likely cast the Prime Minister in a more empathetic light.
Jonathan, we are perpetually, of course, in a minority government, and so talking about when's the next election? And I know we can't get inside the Prime Minister's head, but do you think this changes the calculus about how long he wants to stay in the role, a role that comes with a lot of stress on families?
I don't think it really makes much of a difference. We've all been speculating whether, the end of the year, a couple of deadlines in the NDP deal, or the budget next spring, or, is this going to go all the way to October 2025? I don't think anybody's betting on that. I don't think this has much of an impact. So I think there's a question of how this changes Justin Trudeau's day-to-day, how it impacts him as a politician and a prime minister. But I think the more important question is, how does this impact voters? And I have a hard time imagining that anybody who would consider voting for Justin Trudeau now says they wouldn't, or vice versa. Those who are the haters, I don't think this, the memes, the Twitter sphere, social media has had a field day with this, but I don't think it changes anybody's votes. I don't think it impacts anybody in Canada. And again, you said it earlier on, it's, we're not the US. It's not exactly the same insatiable appetite for scandal, but this is a normal thing. A lot of people, unfortunately, go through this. And unfortunately, in their case, it's in the public sphere and everybody, gets the little bit of a feeding frenzy on it.
One area we haven't seen a feeding frenzy is from any of the opposition figures, from other political leaders in this country. If you were, Tim, a leader of the opposition or in the opposition, How do you react to this?
Like any other human would, I think. If there is, and I hope no one sees this as a political opportunity to seize, I hope they would treat them as they would friends or others who are going through all of this. And just, if asked, I would not do anything proactive and say, look, our thought, look, this is a personal matter for the Prime Minister and his spouse and their children, and we want to respect that. I think any attempt to use it, to weaponize it, is a recipe for political disaster. So I hope all of the opposition leaders stay away from that, and others who are opponents of the Prime Minister. We've already seen, as some have alluded to, you know, the sewage seepage on X or Twitter or whatever that platform is called now. That's going to be there. But I think Jordan nailed it on the head, as did the others. This is so relatable now for people that I think Justin Trudeau as well needs to, the Liberal Party needs to be careful not to try and seize this. This just has to evolve organically as these circumstances do in other lives. That will be hard because, as Rob said, the Prime Minister is a global celebrity, and I think everybody will be waiting for his first utterance, which I think will probably happen before the long weekend to see where it goes. But yeah, be careful, be cautious here, and remember those kids. I mean, I think that's any of us who have seen this circumstance, who've had a connection to this circumstance, know what it can do to children. He's a political figure, he's elected, but this isn't fair game. His kids aren't fair game.
You know, I think inevitably there are going to be some people who are curious about just what happened, and we don't know the answer to that, and we can debate about whether it's even our right to know what happened inside. It's a personal matter that they want privacy. But what we do know is that it is sometimes challenging to attract people to politics in this country because of the scrutiny, because of the toll on family life. It's a big country. You're away from home a lot. You're busy quite a lot. Jordan, when you look at NDP MP Alistair McGregor, who tweeted, "It's a brutal family life for anyone who holds the office." Do you think this is a further indication of the challenges of getting people into this business?
Well, yeah, I can't imagine that whatever happened, that it's totally unrelated to the job, because it is all-consuming. The travel is extreme, the separation from your family, even more so when you're the Prime Minister. And really the amount of attention and energy that the job takes up is huge. And I think something in particular that Prime Minister Trudeau deals with that not every politician does is the level of vitriol and hatred also directed his way by some members of the public. And that, I can only imagine, also wears on a family over time. So I do think that, there's been efforts over the last few years to make Parliament more family-friendly for MPs who particularly have young children, and those are all really, really good efforts, but this is still a really, really brutal job for people to get into.
Jonathan, separation's complicated even in normal circumstances, but when you're the Prime Minister, there are other things to consider, including, as the PMO statement says, ensuring that all legal and ethical steps have been taken. What are some of the other things that they need to be thinking about when you hold an office like this? Ethics, security, travel, housing?
I don't think those things change. I mean, security, the day-to-day, they go to school. Sophie Grégoire Trudeau goes to an event. She has her own security. Those things will probably stay the same. It's a bit more of a strain on the security services just because they'll be living in two separate places. Those types of things in terms of making sure there was time set aside for family, for the couple, for the kids, those things existed before. Again, it's not a normal situation, but it is in the sense that, when a couple separates and they have kids, they have to make adjustments to their life. And that's certainly going to be the case here. It's more complicated. They went through a period of 2 years where they basically were on top of each other 24/7 during lockdowns, which I'm sure didn't help the situation, whatever it was.
What are you talking about? All marriages thrive during lockdown.
So again, these are normal things that unfortunately for them, they don't really get to live it in some privacy. The kids are going to go back to school in a month. everybody's going to know their business. Now that, they've gotten used to it. I don't know if there is ever any getting used to it. So I think we all have to be understanding of them. And yeah, it's going to be about making adjustments, but I don't think it's going to change in terms of PMO's need to make adjustments. Not particularly. I think it'll be pretty similar to the way it was already.
Rob, I've only got like 30 seconds here, but we don't talk about the private lives of public figures in Canada. Do you think we have struck the right balance? Because it's a different one than other countries. Yeah,
I mean, in the United Kingdom, they pry a lot more, the media pries a lot more into politicians' private lives. It's none of our business. A lot of what goes on in a marriage is complicated, regardless of whether you're a prime minister or you're a journalist or a bus driver or whatever. It's a very private thing, and if it doesn't affect his job performance, I don't think it really is any of our business. To Jordan's point, this is a relatable thing because it's happened to so many families around this country and around the world.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks very much to the four of you. An interesting but obviously difficult day, a family day, seeing that kind of a dissolution. Thank you very much.